Discovering your spouse has had an affair, constantly being lied to, pornography addiction, substance abuse. All of these are part of betrayal trauma. Stick around. We're talking about it today on the Brave Talk Show.
Hey, brave girl, how you do the things that you do? Don't mind me.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Brave Talk Show, the show for brave women craving the connection that comes with real conversations about the concerns and TMI details we face every day.
We're your hosts. I'm Brittany.
I'm Vanessa.
I'm Robin, and this is our special co-host for the day,
Lori Thompson.
Lori. Lori, will you just give us a brief introduction on who you are?
Yes. So our family loves like those personality tests. So I'm going to give you like a little synopsis about me for like 30 seconds. So Lori Thompson, born and raised in Santa Barbara, California, with a single parent and an older brother, amazing childhood. I was on The Price is Right after I graduated high school. That's where I fell in love with like game shows and reality TV, which was awesome. I served a mission for my church where I met my husband, and now we're married 23 years, have 8 sons, and life is crazy and wild and awesome.
Well, we're so happy to have you. So happy to have you.
Thank you.
Today's going to be a great episode.
Yes.
Be sure to subscribe to join our weekly conversations. You guys, today we are talking about betrayal trauma. We posted a video not too long ago, and we had so many women in our private messages reaching out to us that you guys are also dealing with this. So we thought, what a better topic than to bring it as an episode and to hopefully give you guys some tools to help heal and some education. So let's get started. But first, what is it?
Hot topic.
Hot topics.
Okay, so the hot topic today is Simone Biles. So the Olympics are still going on. What's your guys' take? I know I've heard both arguments. Mostly, I think she's receiving praise, right? And but there are some people that are getting upset at her. So what do you guys think? What's your take?
I think my biggest thing is like made you see like mental health is not important to a lot of people, and I think like it's
Like
just,
the haters?
Yeah, I just feel like this young woman. First of all, she's young. She put in a spotlight to like in front of the world, and she has won more medals than anybody. Like she's done a lot of work, and so with all the pressure and the light on her, for her to be like mentally, I'm not doing okay. Like I need to check out a little bit, and for people to be like, well, you're a disgrace to the country. Like you just, it's like, how disappointing is that?
Yeah.
Especially for being a young woman, like what, 18, 19? How old is she?
I think she's 22 or 23.
Young woman to know, like,
Yeah.
I'm doing this for this country. And for that's the, so it was really sad to see that.
I also kind of feel like there's like a sense of entitlement that she like owes it to all of us to keep going. I'm like, no, like good for her and her emotional maturity to know that there would be haters, that this is think of the pressure of like walking out of a game in you're kind of like the
prime,
prized player
Yep.
in the prime, just in your local community. Now go to the next level, the Olympics. Like she knew she'd get lashed back. She knew that she'd disappoint a lot of people, but she still had the courage to do it. Like, talk about a brave woman.
Yeah.
I love it. The people that are on their couch, like eating potato chips, watching the Olympics, like, quitter!
You're a quitter.
It's like, what have you done? Get off the couch.
Yeah.
Well, when I originally saw it, I was surprised because I'm like, girlfriend, this is where you don't quit. This is the Olympics.
Right.
So I wasn't like a hater, but I was questioning and was surprised. And the more I watched and the more I listened, and it was Justin Bieber. Justin Bieber!
He always comes in with truth.
It was his quote, or he tweeted to her, like, I was on tour and it physically, mentally, emotionally, I could not do it. And I stopped, and that was the best decision of my whole life. Like, he wanted to die. It was so bad. And so for her to take that step in front of public for the Olympics, it was such a huge, thing. So that was like, oh yes. Like, even though it is the Olympics and I was surprised, it's still so important for her as an individual to be there first, to put herself first.
But you know what's funny? So I'm a diehard Justin Bieber fan. And when he tweeted that he had canceled his worldwide tour because of mental health, I didn't realize that because I had front row tickets to that tour.
Yes, I heard.
And I was pissed. I was like, freaking JB, this is the second year you've canceled. Like, get it together. But then, like, once he posted that, I was like, actually, slow clap. But, like, it's crazy. Like, we forget celebrities and people in the spotlight.
They're just people.
Like, they're just people who need a break as well. So,
And also, I think it's just to realize that the pressure they're under. Like, if you think of Simone, like, everybody's like, and the thing I think was so funny is just like people like, she win too much, she does too much, she needs to let other people win, she win too many medals, oh, now she's creating. So, like, people were against her, like, why does she always win? And then when she's like, okay, I'm backing off, my mental health is important, people's like, well, now why are you mad? I'm like, well, now Sunny, like, if Simone hadn't stepped out, she would have not won her gold medal.
Right.
And she was able to win her gold medal, which was, like, amazing. It's like, what do you want from the girl? Like, give her a break.
Yeah,
Give her
no
a
one's
break.
ever happy, especially when you're in the spotlight. But ladies, we could go on forever and ever. Let's get started. We can't wait to introduce our guest today, Ashlynn Mithcell.
Ashlynn Mithcell kicks divorce and betrayal in the teeth with her real-world example of what's possible after betrayal and how to live boldly with compassion and forgiveness while being boundaried and free from the past. She is an advocate for women who want to live a life full of adventure and freedom in creating the life they deserve despite their circumstances. Come on up, Ashlynn.
Yay!
Welcome, Ashlynn. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you.
So, Robin alluded to it a little bit in the intro, but Robin did a story on Instagram that was our most viewed story, right, with your husband. And you guys, we got hundreds of messages from women saying that they deal with the same thing. And so as our hearts broke and we wanted to hug every single one of you, we're like, we need to do a full episode on betrayal trauma. And then I thought of Ashlynn because Ashlynn, you hold whole courses. You that's what you do for a living. Not only, so you do fitness, Mama Bear Fitness on Instagram, but then you've had a podcast and you run women's groups helping women heal from betrayal trauma.
Yes, and definitely not my life plan. So,
Dang it.
Yeah, tell us how did you get into this
well,
field?
I decided we got help after 15 years of a marriage that was the secrets and not talking about the giant elephant in the room. We got help. And once we started to heal from all of that pain and grief, I realized more people need this because I had no idea there was help, there were support groups, all of these things. And so we told the therapy office that we'd give them a testimonial on their website, and they made videos that went viral that we had no idea that it would come from that. So not the plan, not what I was seeking, but it did create this whole world for me. Like you said, hundreds of women reaching out. It's sadly very common.
Yes. So are you still married to?
No.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure. Give us
So
some
we
clarity.
lived 8 years in recovery.
Okay.
So my former husband, it was only final 3 weeks ago.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Very
wow.
fresh.
We
Very
were,
fresh.
yes.
Okay.
We were married 21 years and lived in the recovery world. He's, still sober for 8 years.
Okay.
And we're able to give a lot to the world. We have a podcast that's still available called The Betrayed, The Addicted, and The Expert. Just 3 different sides of
I love it
a
because it's
topic.
you who's been betrayed, your husband who has the addiction or had the addiction who's in the recovery, and then he wasn't your
Right.
therapist, but a therapist, the expert.
Right.
So you
I
get
love
those
that.
3 different
That is awesome.
perspectives.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, so now we are not married and doing our own thing, but I have a new podcast. We still do the old podcast. We're just not all together.
I love that. Wow. I can't wait. I cannot wait to hear all you have to offer because this is an important topic for sure.
So tell us the betrayal trauma for people who maybe have, if you've gone through it, you know what it is. But for women who maybe haven't experienced betrayal trauma, will you kind of define that for us?
Yeah, because I'd never even heard the term, but I remember feeling really off in my marriage, and I was protecting someone who was hurting me because I loved them and I also hated him. And I didn't react my best. I was not my best self. So I would scream and yell, name call, bring up the past, and then leave the room and go, what is wrong with me? Like, who have I become? And so when I learned about betrayal trauma, it was this light bulb moment of, okay, I can give it a name. I'm not crazy. And there's a reason that I feel this way. I have these trauma responses because I've been living in trauma.
Yeah.
And so my husband former husband, my former husband had sex addiction. So he had 2 affairs, and then he consumed porn secretly since he was 7 years old. So a long history with pornography, which, you know, breeds some disconnection. And so we kind of entered our marriage with a lot of the unknown.
You didn't know any of this before you were
No.
married?
And that's not as common now. A lot of people are being very upfront of, hey, I either have this or I've had this in the past. We know now marriage, having sex, it doesn't fix something like that. It's much deeper, deep-rooted issue. So, yeah.
So you said that you reacted all the wrong way. So if a woman find out, you know, her husband or vice versa have been doing, what is the reaction supposed to be like? I feel like for me it is anger. Like,
Yeah.
like
Yes.
what is, I guess, what's the advice of how do you handle something like that?
Well, I think as a human, we're probably not ever going to respond our best.
Yeah.
Because it hurts.
Yeah.
And when you love, it's painful. And so we are angry. So yes, anger for sure. That's the most common reaction. And we're pushing them away. And then also like, why aren't you choosing me? And so my narrative was always, and has bubbled up again since the divorce, of I don't feel chosen and I will never be enough. And that's a really common narrative that women have after betrayal. And oddly enough, the guy or whoever is the betrayer has the same narrative often. And so it's very different reasons, but we felt very similar.
Yeah, that's actually exactly how I felt. Like, I will never be enough. Like, I'm not good enough for him to stop. I'm like, why can't he choose me?
Yeah.
And it's devastating.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you're right there in front of them. So, you know, whether they're having an emotional affair with someone and that connection, that's painful too.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we minimize and say, well, it's just pornography, or he's just having, or she, it goes both ways. They have a work wife or a work husband. That's still really painful because they're connecting with someone that isn't you.
Yeah.
And they're choosing to share things that maybe you would love to know about them, but they're doing it with someone else. And then, of course, the physical. So there is no, you know, my trauma is not big enough, so I shouldn't get help. I shouldn't do anything about it. I think most of us do that. We push it down and think, my story is not big enough.
Yeah.
And so I don't need to go to therapy. I'm definitely never going to tell anyone. And then I have women who are the opposite and say, my story is so big, I can't relate to any of you because it's just porn, or you just had one affair and my husband had 20. And so everyone deserves healing. It doesn't matter what your story is. If you feel crazy, if you feel hurt, there's help.
So what finally, like, what changed in you, or what was the moment where you realized my story is big enough? I need help. And like, what did that look like? Because I know mine, but so many, we have hundreds of messages in the Brave Talk Show and hundreds in just my personal that's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. Like, I don't even know if I want to. So like for you, when did you decide it was time to find help?
Okay, so random, the internet can be hard. It's what helped hurt my marriage, but it's also amazing. I mean, great things come from it. And so I saw an acquaintance share on Facebook her own story of how she had healed after her husband's betrayal, and it blew my mind. I was like, what is even happening here? This was 9-10 years ago. That was not, people were not vulnerable on social media.
Right.
And so I sent her a private message, and I was like, do you know what's going on in my life? I was so afraid she knew something.
Yeah.
And I'd never told anyone. And she was the first person, which now I am that for so many people, which is crazy. But I was typing this, here's my story, and I don't know what to do. I was that girl.
Yeah.
And, you know, she said, I've created this conference. It's for women to come and just to get educated. Just come and feel supported. And so I did, and it blew my mind. It was just, the education is where I started, and that really is step one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow.
How do you remove the shame from it? Because I think what I read from our inbox is like, my husband going through this, and they're willing to send it in the inbox, but then it's just like, they are okay, from what I've seen, women are okay living in that misery and uncomfortable in dealing with all that pain because they're afraid of the community that they're around will shame him for them. So like, how do we remove that so then they can seek the help?
Well, it's hard because you love your husband, right? And so you don't want to throw him under the bus and tell the whole world, my husband has an addiction, he's a dirtbag. Like, because that's what our society thinks, right? Like, society thinks, oh, he's gross, oh, he has this, and that's what they label him as. And you're like, that's the last thing you want, because you still love your husband, you're hurt, but you still love him, and you want everybody to think the best of him, and you don't want him to be labeled. And so I think that's one thing, but how do you do it?
Yeah, but I think when it comes to addiction, I can see that. But I'm saying, like, when your husband is cheating and choosing to cheat over and over again, because I think the trauma plays a part, but when that person is choosing not to seek help, and then that woman have to deal with that, okay, I know my husband's doing this, but, like, I'm so ashamed that I'm going to stay in that. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like that's the difference. Yeah.
It's more common for, our story was not common, where both of us said, hey, let's put an end to this. It sounds like your story was as well. It's more common for the woman, and I don't know why that is. Maybe you know. We seek help more and are more open to help than a guy, even if the guy is the betrayed. And so the shame is ridiculously high on both sides. And for me, it was that I'm embarrassed. So I loved him and I wanted to protect him, but I was also protecting myself. Because I have been the girl who said, oh, why'd they get divorced? Did she cheat? Oh, she must have not, you know, all
Done
the
1,
stupid
2, 3.
narratives.
Yeah.
We have to find blame, and once we find blame, okay, that's the reason. And I think we want to do that because then it protects our marriage, right? If I can place blame and say it's because she was doing that or he was doing that, okay, we're not doing that, so we're good.
Right.
When in reality, there's so much more to it. And it breaks my heart. I lived that way for 15 years. No one deserves to have that life. There is a life after betrayal, even my life now, newly divorced. I am happy, even though I didn't choose my divorce, because I've done the work and I know that I am worthy, that I am always enough for me.
So tell us about that work. Like, you're at that spot that despite your circumstances, you found happiness. So share that with our audience. What are the steps? What's the work that needs to be done to get to that place?
Yeah, so this might be the first step of really understanding what you feel like and that there is help and hope no matter what your partner's doing. So if your partner is actively having an affair, or you're thinking maybe they're looking at something in secret, it's the secrets. It's sometimes not even the act that's so painful, but it's the lies and the hiding. And so just getting educated so that you can understand little things like attachment theory and understanding why are they seeking validation somewhere else? Why are they, why am I avoiding the whole issue? I was avoidant attachment, my former husband, anxious attachment. And so we just, And so once I started getting educated and learning some of the terminology and saying, okay, this is why he's showing up this way. This is why I'm showing up this way. All I can control is me. All I can control is my own healing. I can't make him stop. I can't make him have boundaries. I have to create my own. And so the education, number one. And we have our podcast, which is free education. And because it has, the former betrayed, the former addict, and a specialized therapist, so someone who's dealing with betrayal and addiction on an everyday basis, it's very, very narrowed in so that you can get educated on that specific topic.
Now, what would you do? I have two friends that come to mind. One that, stayed silent, embarrassed, ashamed, husband was off with another woman right away and just was horrified. Another friend, every gritty detail listed on social media. I know as a friend, I need to just support however their process, but what else can I do to, especially for my friend that is silent and ashamed, she does need education and help. What is something that we can do as a friend or a sister or a mom or that aspect?
Yeah. Well, the fact that you care is the first thing. And there's never the right words to say except, I love you. I'm thinking of you, and this sucks, because it does. It sucks, no matter what your situation is. A lot of people will send a podcast episode or a show like this and just say, hey, I saw this and it made me think of you. And I want you to know that there's help. And if there's anything I can do, I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So little things like that.
Something that I found not helpful when I was finding out about some of my husband's addiction and the lies that came with those, I was, same thing, ashamed, embarrassed, and super particular on who I was telling initially, and now the whole world knows. But some of the things that I remember that were really hurtful is I came to some family members and told them, and I was so hurt, and I remember some of the things they would say are like, oh, that does suck, but just remember, he's so good to you, and you don't want your family to fall apart, and he's such a good dad. And I was like, or just sit with me right here that my husband's been lying to me for 10 years.
Right.
And like, don't try to tell me how great he is, because I know those things, but like, let me for a minute
I'm
just
hurting.
be upset.
I need to
You know,
feel
like
this.
I felt like they were trying to like save me and my marriage right off the bat.
Minimizing your hurt.
And like it was like so brief, like, oh, that so sucks, but he is so good to you, Robin, and all these things. And I was like, that actually doesn't help right now. Did you find that for you?
And the opposite can be the same thing of like, well, you for sure should leave, you know.
Right.
Why would you stay in a
I got that
marriage
too,
like that? And then it's this other people's opinions, and then I've already kind of lost my sense of trust with myself, my trusting my gut, intuition, whatever you believe in, your higher power. You lose that with betrayal, because you might sense that something is off, and then when you ask, they're like, no, you're crazy. And so then when other people tell you, like, you should be doing this, all the shoulds, it's like crazy and more crazy. And so you really just need validation in the beginning. And that's step 2, is get educated and then validation. And I like what you said about being careful with who you choose to share it with, because I wasn't as, skilled. I had kept it secret for so long that one of the first friends I told, she immediately was like, oh, is he a pedophile? He must have, and I was like, oh, no. There's a lot of narratives that we just don't
People
understand.
change. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And so it really hurt me, and then I'm having to soothe her, and
and you don't want her to
wait.
think your husband's a pedophile. Like, that's not helpful either.
So just being protective of your own story. Not everyone deserves to hear it. And so finding that support and validation. So for me, it was in a support group, and that was, I hated it in the beginning. I don't know if you ever did any of that, but I didn't like being surrounded by like-minded women who were hurting, because I'm like, I'm not like you. I can be happy. I'm confident. I was in so much shame that I was just like, no, I'm fine. And so probably week 6 of my group, I was like, okay, I really need this, and this is awesome. We started to work through our shame resilience and really digging into our own stuff. And that's for sure what started me of, okay, I'm educated, I know there's a lot of things, but I don't actually know how to do it. I found the support and that validation. And once we have that validation of like, yeah, you deserve all the healing, and that isn't fair, okay. I don't
feel like
have to
it breaks
repeat
down
myself.
some walls. When you finally get that validation that you're not crazy.
Well, and we repeat ourselves until we feel heard. And so if your friend or, your child or your sister, whatever, is telling you the same stuff about her partner, of just how hurt she is, just listen. Validate her.
And I think I've seen them, I feel like, in the woman that, I think sometimes they just don't have the resources. Like you said, they don't know where to go for the help, because when they go to the friends, with anybody, it's the reaction of like, oh, don't leave, like, you're married, you've worked so hard for this. Or like, no, you got to leave now. And so they're conflicted of what to do the best. And I think the biggest thing is like, there's not enough resources out there for women to be like, how do I get the help that I need to leave or to get better? And I think the biggest thing, I just wonder what happens then, because you have men that, or women, vice versa, that have done those things and they don't see anything wrong with it. They're like, no, like, this is all in your head. You're making all this up. Like, how do you help, I guess, the couple that's like the opposite, where this one is like the craziness. Like, I feel crazy that I'm feeling all this thing, but like he's saying this is all okay, but I want my marriage. So how do we come to that balance of like, to work through that?
Oh yeah, that's the hard part, and it does not come fast, because really what it comes down to is You have to find that peace within you to realize what you value, and you probably have very different values and to your core if one sees no problem and one is deeply hurt. And that doesn't mean you can't change, but it's going to take a lot of work to make sure that your core values at least line up. They don't need to be the same, but it may not end in marriage. I mean, we lived happily in recovery for 8 years, and it still ended in a divorce. That doesn't mean that's the outcome, but it also doesn't mean we did it for our marriage to work. We did it for ourselves. And so I see women who are in that situation, and once they start doing their own work, they become stronger, because we lose our voice through this. We feel small and crazy, the gaslighting. And so once you start to realize, I do matter, I do have a voice, I am enough, we don't have to come back fighting and mean, but we can come back strong. And say, hey, this doesn't work for me anymore.
Well, I love all these points, even if your husband isn't into porn or having an affair, just like basic, male dominance, like there's little things that every wife, and husband as well, but every wife can take what you're saying and make little tweaks, like, no, I am good enough, like just like with little things that he may do or say to you, which will make a huge difference.
Well, and that's an interesting point. I felt so compelled to change my life because of this really awful circumstance, but the average marriage that has really not anything big, they don't get to learn all these beautiful tools that we have in recovery. That's one of them, is saying, hey, what are my core values? What do I actually believe in? What do you believe in? Let's see how we can figure this out and be boundary.
So
I love that. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah. One thing I was going to say about this is when you said, what happens when, one says, I don't think this is wrong, and the other one does. With one of my husband's addictions, like I've mentioned, he's had several. One of them was substance abuse. And for the religion that I grew up in and the religion I was practicing in, like, it was not okay to be using this substance, and we couldn't, do some of the things in the church if you're, not following this law. And so I finally got to the point where I was like, well, actually we met with an addiction counselor for a long time, and he just kind of said, this is something your husband's going to probably struggle with the rest of his life, and you have to decide right now, like, are you okay with that? Like, are you okay with your husband using this substance? And part of me was like, no. Like, don't tell me he's going to do this the rest of his life, because he can stop, and he's going to stop, and all these things. But I kind of had a moment that I was like, and aside from other addictions, specifically on the substance, I was like, is Johnny still a good person even though he's using this substance? And I was like, yes. Like, is he a good dad? Yes. And so, and he finally came to me and said, listen, I don't think there's anything wrong with me using this substance, whether I agreed or not. Like, and I was like, well, we can't do these things in the church and all these things, and I don't want my kids to see this, and for your health. And he's like, at the end of the day, like, I don't see a problem with it. So I kind of had to decide right then and there, like, what are my boundaries? And so I decided, I was like, okay, like, this is your life and your choice. I respect that you're going to choose to do this. I don't think you should. Here are the reasons why. But the boundary I'm going to set is, you are going to do that, and you can continue to use this substance, but you will not lie to me about it anymore. So go ahead.
Your boundary came in.
It is open and clear that you are using this substance, and these things we no longer will do or can do, but the boundaries are never around my children, and you will not lie to me, because it was lie after lie. I'd find it and find it. And so after that, he never lied to me again. He used it openly, and then he just decided to quit.
And that's often how it goes, is we give that permission of like, you get to choose, and we try to control, right? And then all of a sudden they don't want to do it anymore.
And I asked him, I was like, why? Like, because when I initially found out, like, it was 10 years of on, off, lies. And I, like, initially when I first found out, I was like, ultimatum, like, I'm going to have to leave you. I can't believe this. And then more addictions. And so finally when I was like, you know what? I still love you. I'm still here working on this marriage, knowing you're doing all these things. He was like, well, it's not fun anymore. I really think, because he stopped, And he still, we understand addiction because we've been through the therapy, but like, yes, he still has temptations and all those, and we check in. Like, it's not something that's ever going to go away for him. He thinks about it still, but he has the tools now to, backtrack when he starts getting higher up, so he doesn't act on these different addictions. But it's just crazy how I finally was like, he doesn't think it's wrong, and I do morally, and so I now give you permission to do it. My boundaries are no lying, no in front of the kids, and it took him like a year, but for doing it for 10 years, it was crazy how quick he was able to stop.
But sorry, what I love that you talk about is you were curious.
Yeah.
You didn't just go black and white, and which is what most of us do.
Right.
Is no, this is wrong, don't do it.
Right.
And that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Instead, you did get curious with what you believe
Yeah.
and your values, and you created boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's really healthy. Not
Yeah.
everyone can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how I did it, honestly, but now I'm like looking back, I'm like, that was really good of me to do.
I think,
don't know
so
how
I
I
think
did
there's
it.
going to be a lot of women watching this and thinking about pornography specifically and thinking, I'll never give him permission to view that. I'll never think that that's okay. And so I think with your story, you said permission, but really, I think what you did is you just decided to focus on you. You just let go of that control, where you weren't like, I hope you use it.
Right.
Here, do you want me to go to the store and buy you some?
Yeah.
It wasn't that. It was just like, no, listen, I know I can't control you. I can't make you stop.
Yeah.
So you've got to stop on your own. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. Like, I'm literally taking that burden off.
Yeah.
And I'm taking it off my shoulders because I can't change it. I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to focus on me. You do you. I love you at the core. And so that's not going to change that. But for me, I'm going to need these things, and those boundaries come into play really well.
Yeah.
And I think every boundary looks different in a home. I remember I was in court, like, for, like, a divorce thing, and it was to the point where it's like pornography was taking over their life. And I was sitting in one of the therapy, like, as, you know, as a caseworker, we get some time to get in, and they came to this understanding. To me, it was so weird. Like, it was like, but that's what worked for them. It was like, okay, he's like, I'm going to stop. Like, I've been really doing really good. And, you know, like, he's like, I'm trying. Like, he's doing the individual work. Like, 6 months in therapy. And then all of a sudden she was like, you know what? Because he was like, it's tempting. The temptations are there. Like, it's hard. Like, you know, it's something he did since he was a young kid. So it's hard to just all of a sudden be like, I'm never going to watch it again. You know, so he's like, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, there's time I'm like, I need to, you know what I mean? And then it was out of nowhere. I was sitting in this therapy and she's just like, what about if together we watch stuff, and then she put her boundaries in it. So we don't watch this, we don't watch this, we don't watch this, but together, you and I will watch this part, or this and this. And he was like, what? And even the therapist, I think we all were just like, you know, kind of like,
Yeah.
but that's what, you know, it worked for them. I remember, like, we met them a year later, and it was like, they were in a much better place because he was not lying to her. It was something that she has, like, you know, only with me, this and this. And it's just like, for the rest of us, we can be like, that is crazy. Like, I would never do that. But that's what worked for them. And they're living within that boundary. And I feel like as long as you set up those boundaries and you guys follow those, like, who are we to be like, how, you know what I mean? So I think it works for them.
I have a lot. In fact, after I posted that video on The Brave about my husband's pornography addiction, I had probably 200 to 300 women into my personal DM saying, different faiths, like, that maybe don't frown upon pornography, and they're like, it's normal for, like, my husband to look at pornography, like our friends do, and all those type of things, but, like, I don't feel comfortable with it. Like, what are your suggestions? And it's so hard because I'm not a therapist, right? And so I'm just like, listen, at the end of the day, like, you guys set your own boundaries, but something that stood out was that you don't feel comfortable with it. And that's enough to tell your husband.
Yes.
Because they're like, what is it allowed? And I'm like, that's everyone's personal moral compass.
But
you just told me you do not feel comfortable with it.
Have that
so absolutely,
conversation.
you need to talk to your husband about that.
And I think that's what I love when you say about your husband, the addiction. Like, you didn't feel comfortable with it, but you like, he's telling me, like, he's not.
At the end of the day, I realized, like, this is his body. If he wants to consume these things that I think are going to cause cancer and impairment and all these things, like, that's him, but it will not ever be around my kids, and you will not lie to me. And that's kind of what I came to conclusion. What am I okay with? Because I keep trying to control and put these ultimatums, and it's just escalating into all these other things. And once, you know, we got that under control, and I was like, I know he's doing this. It's clear. It's not a secret. Then we still had all these other addictions to tackle too. So I had to, like, you know, kind of
choose your battle.
Do one at a time. But he was able to quit that. But yeah, it's interesting because some people don't view pornography as morally wrong on their compass. And so I just told these women, like, if you feel uncomfortable with it, even morally, culturally, that's totally normal to do in your world. You need to speak up.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I grew up in a religion that is, like, way against pornography, and we don't practice anymore. And it's interesting because people are like, oh, so you're okay with porn now? No, actually, and what we did was same thing. We had to get curious. What are my values? And I value connection.
Yeah.
I value that intimacy, and I know from experience that that won't breed it for us.
Yeah.
So it's my husband, former husband, divorced, not practicing any religion, still not interested in going back to where he was.
Yeah.
So
I love that, getting curious.
it's more about
on your morals.
values than your belief.
Yeah.
And it's right because it's something like I think majority of people watch porn and it's normal. Like it's like a normal thing for the other half of the world. So sometimes you have husband that are like, I've seen husband that are like, no, like there's nothing wrong with it. Like this is what men do, you know?
Yeah.
And then the wife is like, no, like, you know, so it's like that battle of like, it's normal, but the wife is in pain like, this is not normal. This is
Well,
not
that's
okay
what some
to
of the
me.
wives were saying is like, our situation is different in the sense that he doesn't hide it. He's open with it. It's not a
Yeah.
secret or lie, but I still feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, then you absolutely should say something and set boundaries.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
your body's saying, hey, there's a boundary that's broken here. That's your values. You
Yeah.
got to dig into that.
Yeah.
And you have to be in tune with it too, and you have to, get curious. Okay, so step 1, get educated. Step 2, find
Validate.
support and be validated. And then what's step 3?
Step 3 is to, what did I say?
People, the person,
Stretch my legs.
was it the person that you choose people you tell your story to, right?
Yeah, you trust
go?
your.
Trust you.
Oh,
Okay,
I missed step 3.
support and validation. Yeah. And then, okay,
Next
now
one.
I got it.
Okay,
I
so
did right.
back in, Gainer.
Okay, so step 3 would be self-care and accountability. So I practice what we call dailies. And again, this is like everyone should be doing this. It would feel so good if we could all do this, but I was compelled. I was never consistent at anything in my life. I always wanted to have a spiritual, devotional every morning, and I sucked at it. And I wanted to work out, and I sucked at it. And so putting myself into this world of recovery where consistency is such a big deal in order for you to gain traction, that we came up with our own dailies. So a spiritual devotional. I don't practice religion, but I have a spiritual devotional every day. I am connected to my higher power. I do intentionally move my body every single day. And that can be a walk, it can be stretching, it can be a workout, it doesn't matter. I journal when needed, so I use that as a tool to flush out the broken record in my head. I check in with my feelings using a feelings wheel. Where am I at? Am I feeling resentment? Am I angry? And why am I yelling at my kids? Whatever it is. I practice self-care. So 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes, half a day, whatever that looks like, I take care of myself so that I can show up for my kids, show up for my former partner. I mean, I'm still a parent with him. And I'm an owner of a business. I have to show up there too. So there's a lot of things that I do, but finding that consistency in taking care of myself, and then I have accountability for it. So that's kind of where my groups come in, is we teach the skill set that you don't learn in therapy of recovery, of just saying, hey, I'm here for me. I'm taking care of me so that I can heal. And I need some of that accountability. I need you to call me out when, I think this is what's going on and he's this, this, and this, and we show up complaining, and then we can, take a look back and go, okay, what can I do?
Yeah.
Is this something you did with your husband, or something you do by yourself, something you do with your girls? How do you do it?
Kind of a mix.
Okay.
So we started out doing it together. We were separated and hated each other because it was right after he told me of his second affair, and we just started therapy. So we would work out silently, doing, kickboxing and getting out that energy. And then it morphed into our own individual time, because we had different schedules, and my kids figure out their own ways. And they have their own self-care, which I love. I had self-care, I think, as a kid. I just didn't realize it. I didn't name it. Mm-hmm. So one of my youngest, she loves to do makeup. But she really will go put it on at 6 o'clock at night, do it for an hour, and then take it off. Yeah. She doesn't even go anywhere. She just loves what it makes her feel like.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I have a question for you, mainly because I'm trying to get clarity, like in my own marriage about this. So obviously when you're betrayed, there's a loss of trust. Mm-hmm. You no longer trust your partner, and you no longer trust yourself. And I don't know in my marriage if there's ever been the proper steps to rebuild the trust. And so we're having kind of this conflict where my husband's like, you know, you don't respect me. And I'm like, why would I respect you? You freaking lie to me all the time and all these different things. And so like, I'm trying to learn like, how can I trust him again? But also there has to be action on his part to try to build trust. And I keep saying to him, like, what are you doing to build trust? Like, we get to a place and then, you know, I rely on you and you don't follow through. Like then I'm back to square one of that, you know? So like how have you dealt, what can we give our listeners on being able to trust again and like actionable steps to build trust again?
Yeah, and that's the most important part. And I think a lot of us, we don't know where to start or we skip it because the don'ting is hard.
Yeah.
And it's so respectful that people can stop doing what they're painfully addicted to.
Right.
But that's just step one.
That's just step one, exactly. And I think my husband was like, well, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm like, but I'm freaking broken. Like there's 12 years of like lies and lies and lies, you know?
Yeah.
So how do we build that up?
Well, and it's for us, it was like, okay, we have to burn that old relationship because it was a mess and it was full of all this pain and hurt. And so to rebuild something new, it can be really fun, but it does require two partners.
Right.
And so not everyone has that opportunity, like I said. You can do it on your own. And sometimes a partner can show up if they're in a place where they're willing to say, hey, you're learning some new tools. I can see it. I like it. Teach me.
Right.
And that can work. But seeing your partner showing up in dailies, that's one of the biggest things. And so in the beginning, doing it together was really nice. It was like, hey, we're building trust together. Look, I'm taking care of myself. And then to see him choosing to do that day after day for 8 years, I mean, that's awesome. We have a series on the podcast called The 5 Indicators of Real Recovery. And it walks through what it looks like. And it's actually really basic. Like you're going to be like, yeah, that's my marriage, right? But it's, you know, helping with household needs. So, you know, if your partner works outside of the home and he has betrayed you and then comes home and he's checked out, that's not taking care of household needs. Those are basics, right? And so it's, you know what? I'm going to start helping with putting the kids to bed, doing dishes, taking out the garbage. Like these are my responsibilities because I see that you're doing a lot. And so it's little things like that that build trust. When I was on a group call one night, my daughter who was asleep woke up sick. She's throwing up. My husband at the time was also on a group call. So we're both busy working. Kids are asleep. She's sick. I'm texting him going, I'm on my group call. I'm trying to listen. It's Zoom, you know. I need help. In that moment, he's like, shuts down his group. Hey guys, I got to go help. I'm out of here. He let go of his group. I said, I need to go. And we took care of our daughter. That was a huge trust building moment and it had nothing to do with recovery.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's little things like that of just showing up. And a lot of times addiction is all the time, it's selfish. And it's that fulfilling the needs inside of ourselves, right? And so when we look outside of ourselves and say, hey, I really love and respect you and I want you to feel safe with me. I want you to feel trust.
Yeah. And do you want to see this consistently? Because I would think like I've had a few friends that gone through a lot of those like traumatic things. And I feel like there's a stage of like, I'm going to do whatever you want me to do because right now I don't want the attention on me. So tell me what you want and I'll do it. You know what I mean? All the kids, da-da-da. And I feel like you would want to see a consistency of like the willingness to do it. It's not just doing it, but like I'm willing to do it because I haven't been here. I've been missing in somebody else's relationship or something else. Like to be able to see that person like consistently showing up for you to be like, yes, like I have a friend that's going through something so familiar and it's always the opposite. Like we always say, like, you're going to leave, work it out, gonna leave. But I think finally she's doing the work on her own and you can see her strength, like where she's like, I can do it. Like I am in therapy, I can see the process. And then he doesn't care. He's like, and like he doesn't even know she's doing all this work to like kind of prep to like leave
Because he's so checked out.
because he's so checked out. So it's like crazy.
Well, and I will say this to bring some relief down here. We did both start out to save our marriage. Like, we're going to make this work. I'm going to show up and I'm going to stop being mean because I want to be a better partner. And he's going to start showing up. so yeah, most of us start out that way, and it's not what keeps us going. That's the willpower. That's the white knuckling it, right?
Yeah.
But it's when it shifts, and you really start to see, I'm doing this for me.
Yeah. So
love
my
that.
husband and I have been in marriage counseling for a year now, like consistently. We don't miss a week because we're like in the thick of it. Like we have, 12 years of betrayal trauma and a whole slew of other things happening. So we've been working, and we finally come to a point that we realized, like, we started like white knuckling, like we're about to get divorced. Let's save it. And even after a year, like though we've like come so far and done so much progress, we're realizing now that we actually need to like work on ourselves. And so we're kind of taking a break with like focusing on working on the marriage, and we're just working on us, because even just doing that as a whole, like it really comes down to ourselves. And it's almost more complicated to keep white knuckling it when there's just so many things each of us need to do.
And I think when you do that, you realize like, oh, I'm strong. This, you know what I mean? Like I think sometimes, like you said, we do it for the marriage and for the children so much that we get lost in it. And then I've seen people when the kids move out, when the life is not there, and then they're like,
Who are you?
what am I doing here? What the, And I think it's important to like, I love the self-care, because I think like you have to find that happiness within you. You have to do things that makes you happy, because if you're relying on that person that has hurt you so much to make you happy, you will never be like satisfied. So that's why I love that you have to like self-care, and you being like, I got myself first. They will come together once we find out where we at. Like,
well, and sometimes when you're in so much conflict or the drama triangle, it's like ding, 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 ding. Like you can't leave. And so it's like, I need a minute, you need a minute to like become our best selves. And then when we come back together, like how beautiful it could be.
I think that's one of the most hopeful parts of whether it's betrayal trauma or just marriage conflict in general, where you let go, you surrender that control of trying to make your spouse the best spouse possible for you. And you just surrender that, and you're like, I'm going to focus on me, because I can't control him. But what's hopeful about it is I can control me. Like, I can be in charge of my own happiness. If I want a rockin' birthday, I can make my birthday rockin'. If I want this part of my life, then I can make that possible. I don't have to rely on somebody else and then have my expectations be lowered and lowered and lowered and then be sad that they weren't met. Like, that's such a hopeful part of marriage, when you realize I can focus on me. I can do it. Like, I can participate in self-care and just like get my shiz together, because then like
you just care less what you're doing. That's what I realized. Like when you say control, I'm a big control person. Like
no way.
I could care. No, like I could care less what you're doing. Like me, I'm all like it probably sounds selfish, but I feel like after I've been married for 12 years, I was just like, oh my gosh, my husband, why is he gone all the time? Oh my gosh, the kids, help me. And like I'm not finished with school. The minute I was just like, you know what? I could care less. I'm gonna finish my school. Like I was like, I applied to the U. My kids. I'm like, I got this. Like. If you want to show up for your kids, great. But like me, if I want something to happen for me, I have to do it. And since then, it's just like, whew.
Feels good.
Like this time, I'm like, I don't know what Yahush is doing half of the day. I'm like, I don't know where you are. But cool. Like, you know what I mean? Because I'm not, like, I'm good, And I think it's like, once you like get yourself to where it's like, I control myself. My happiness is not relying on you, that I'm not home sitting here sad in bed because you're not home, because you're somewhere. So it's like, okay.
Well, and that's ideal, right? That's the letting go and the surrender.
Way to be ideal, Vanessa.
I try. It's a messed up world I see out there.
But it is probably one of the hardest steps to let go and not control. Because when life is chaotic and we feel out of control, there's so many lies and secrets. We are like hyper focused on what they are doing. And so I see a lot of the tracking where they are, and send me a picture when you leave, and who are you with, and and it feels, I know this because I did it, it feels like, oh, this is helping me. We're building trust, and all it's doing is building more distrust.
I've seen this, like my friends, like it's their house and they're like, I have 5 my friends, oh, my husband's almost and I'm like, oh gosh, that's tiring. Like literally the other day I was at my friend's house and she's like, oh, where is that? I think, oh, he's here. And I'm just like,
which is like totally an understandable thing. But
yes,
when your husband can't even tell you, like, and you, I don't know if you guys can relate, but when you find a spouse who's lying over little things and then over very big things, then I'm like, are you really going to the grocery store? So like, then you have to find yourself checking. So then you feel like,
That peace of mind.
I'm not crazy.
He's building trust. He told me he's going to the grocery store and that's where he is. And you're right, I did that for a long time too. And it wasn't building trust. I was just completely losing myself and having a full-time job. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it feels right. And it's just, we all have to get to that step though, where we can really say, I'm secure in myself that no matter what he chooses or she, I'm okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is a hard place to get, but it's these steps, right? Education, support, and then self-care.
Okay,
to
what's
be
step
able to
4?
get there. Processing the pain and the grief. So I was just thinking yesterday and telling my friend, I wish there was this, everyone could take a grief course, because I feel like if we learned how to really grieve and process our pain, the world would be a better place.
Oh, sign me up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need a grief
Teach a
course.
course, will you?
I know. I really do think there's a lot of value, because think of all the things we grieve about: job loss, miscarriage, loss of a loved one,
Friend loss.
everything.
Yeah.
For me, losing my religion, I mean, that's a song, but it was grief. It was a year of grieving.
Yeah.
And because I knew how to grieve, because of this awful thing in my marriage, I could do it.
Yeah.
And I know how to grieve. And I feel like I have micro grievances every day. When someone cuts me off in the car, in the lane, I don't freak out. I'm like, I'm going to be a little bit late. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like, so learning
It's a
how
skill.
to process and how to grieve, I learned that in therapy.
I think
I think
processing
everyone
the
needs
trauma is like, I feel like that's like the key.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if you really allow yourself to like go through that again, it's like you healing. It's like a healing process.
Yeah.
But I think we're so easily to put like a Band-Aid, like one of my professors used to say, like trauma is like a cut, right? If you don't clean it, let's say you get a cut and you decide like, I'm not going to clean this, I'm just going to put a Band-Aid on, you'll be okay. Then that will get infected, it get gross, it get nasty because you don't deal with it. But if you take the time to clean it and take care of it, and like really kind of like the self-care and
Education
take care of it
and
and
support.
educate, and do the work, then all you have is that scar. And that scar sometimes is a reminder of like what you went through, but it's not something where you have to like go deeper and find it.
not
And
an
so,
open wound,
it's an open wound. So it's like a scar. You'll never forget because that was traumatic in your life. But you've dealt with it where it's just a reminder that I will never go there again.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the interesting thing with that, the body keeps the score. I'm a huge believer in that.
Yes.
And so when that first conference that I went to, the book is heavy, but one of the speakers said, how many of you women are sick with an autoimmune disease, depression, anxiety, you've gained weight, you've lost weight? 98% of the women.
Of course.
Because we're holding it inside, we're stuffing it down, and we're thinking, if I don't talk about it, it will go away. And it doesn't. It just festers inside, and it shows up in how we show up for a friend, or how we show up for work, or for ourselves.
Or into addictions.
It seeks through your life, throughout your life, in any color. Like I see it all the time. Like even with kids that have been to so much, and now they're like in the adult life, and they've never dealt with anything. And now it's like, oh, I'm going in a relationship. Oh, but my dad, or my mom. And so if you keep it all inside, at one point, you're going to reach that limit where it's just like explosion of like, how do I deal with this,
So I created an online course with the therapist of the podcast I do. And it's for people who don't have the resources to go to therapy, or maybe they don't. We kind of live in a mecca of addiction recovery here in Utah County. But not everyone has that. We help people around the world. And so this program walks you through how to process the pain. And we actually have you do these 5 letters where you're really releasing some of these things. And it's a program just for women who've been betrayed and has nothing to do with their partner. Like, you could be married, divorced, it could have happened 20 years ago and you never dealt with it. It's really a beautiful program. And that's part of it, is like, you have to learn to process. And it's something that we can't just figure out. And most of us weren't taught that as kids, how to grieve or feel.
What's that program called, and where could someone find it?
It's called Beyond Betrayal, and our company's called Beyond Enough, because I'm not just enough, I am beyond enough.
Love that.
We'll link all of that in the YouTube notes and everything. So that's so great.
Was there a 5th step?
Yes.
Of course there's a 5th step.
Yes. The 5th step for me and for most women is trauma therapy. So processing the pain is big. And even the Beyond Betrayal program, we walk you through how to do those things. But sometimes there's triggers that, they come up and you may not know what a trigger is. Let me give you a quick example, non-betrayal related. My dad died in the night, and my mom didn't get to ride in the ambulance with him to the hospital. And so she saw that ambulance, right? And she didn't think anything of it. She's dealing with my dad passing away. And a year later, we're driving down the road, and I had tried to explain what a trigger meant, what it looked like. And she said, I just saw an ambulance drive by, and everything hit me. It came back, and I'm thinking of your dad, and I'm crying. And that whole moment, it's real. And you physically feel it, you emotionally feel it. And it's hard to pull yourself back into reality. So that's a trigger. And a lot of times we can't move forward without some trauma therapy. And so I go every other week still. And I'm not doing betrayal trauma work. I'm doing a lot of my inner child and healing those crazy narratives that I've brought into my adult life, And so it's called Accelerated Resolution Therapy. And it is ART for short. But what I'm doing is I'm taking these narratives. I don't have to say anything out loud if I don't want to, which is really important for someone who's had trauma. It's really hard to talk about those things out loud sometimes. And I am using my brain, and it is kind of crazy, but I'm allowing myself to reprocess and make it not a scary and sad moment. And it's not that it never happened, but I can now have those moments and not feel that visceral response.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's great.
That's awesome.
So I want to make sure that our audience knows that there are a ton of resources out there. Like, you might feel isolated if this is your story or part of your story, but there are a lot of resources out there for you. Ashylnn is a great resource where they can come to you, they can follow you on Instagram, they can sign up for your programs, they can listen to your podcast for free. There's also therapy. There's lots of therapy in preparation for the show. I Googled it, and there are therapists who just specialize in addiction recovery and betrayal trauma. There are free groups. There's one that I know of that is in this area called SAL. And there are books. There are so many resources out there to help you not feel isolated. So please, if this is part of your story, don't feel like you have to do it alone or you have to figure out. Do what Ashylnn says and get that education and reach out to somebody, find that support, participate in self-care, and find some type of therapy. Even if you can't afford therapy, like podcast therapy, something to help you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of free therapy out there. So I think Wasatch Behavioral Hospital or Mental Health offer and if you go to your OBGYN or any your doctors, you ask them, there is free for any kind of trauma. That will give you that free. And I know in Salt Lake University Health have tons. And also I think people don't know that the work, your HR, they usually have free therapy you can get with your insurance. So that's one thing people doesn't know a lot of the time. And so that's some research you can do with your work and find out especially if you're working on yourself and want that extra help.
Yeah.
I say go for it.
I feel like if you feel like getting help or recovering and healing is super overwhelming initially, I have to find a therapist and will I like them? Just start by education. Just start by listening to her podcast and realizing you're not alone. Listening to other people's stories is a good way to be I have a community. I might not have met them in real life, but there are other people out there just like me. And just starting with self-education and self-improvement is something that I kind of started with, was just I want to learn more about this. I want to learn why my husband does this, and just learning as kids and as we grow into our adulthood, we don't have language for certain things, right? So our tiny little kids don't even know what sex is or what it is. And so as a 20-year-old, I had no idea what betrayal trauma was or all these type of things. So just getting the vocabulary in your adult brain before you start on this, big embarkment. So, so remind us your podcast one more time because I want to listen.
Yes, it's called The Betrayed, The Addicted, and The Expert.
And then
I have a new one called This is Ashylnn. Just me.
Oh, I love
And I
that.
interview people.
What are you, like, what's your niche or what are you focusing on that one?
All the things. So betrayal, trauma, and addiction is the Betray the Addicted expert, whereas this is Ashylnn. It's still recovery work, but it's secretly recovery work.
Yeah.
So I made it for everyone, but I'm telling you all the things that have really helped me move forward and the people that I love that I'm talking with.
I
So that's a
love
great
that.
resource. It's a great
Congratulations
place
on
to
that.
start.
That's
That's
exciting.
awesome.
Well, thank you for joining our brave conversation.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell notification so you don't miss our next episode.
Ready for more? Click on the next video for more brave conversations.
Have some brave topics you'd like us to discuss? Leave your suggestions below. We'd love to hear from you.
See you next week.
Hey, brave girl.